The rifle shot cracked through the morning air, sending a flock of sparrows scattering from the cottonwoods as Violet Jackson's wedding day shattered into 1,000 pieces. She bolted through the back door of the small church in Cottonwood Springs, Colorado, her white satin wedding dress bunched in her trembling hands, tears streaking her carefully applied rouge. It was 1878, and at 22 years of age, Violet had nearly become Mrs. Frederick Pullman until his true nature revealed itself moments before they were to exchange vows. The dusty streets of Cottonwood Springs stretched before her as she ran, the late May sun beating down on her uncovered head. She'd lost her veil somewhere in the chaos. Violet's lungs burned, but she didn't stop until she reached the town square where a small stone fountain trickled in the center. Without thinking, she ducked behind it, crouching low, her once pristine dress pooling around her in the dirt. The fountain wasn't much, just a circular stone basin with a simple spout that provided clean drinking water for the townspeople and their horses, but it was enough to shield her from immediate view. She couldn't have gotten far. Frederick's voice boomed from down the street. "Find her." Violet pressed her back against the cool stone, heart hammering against her ribs. How had everything gone so terribly wrong? Just minutes ago, she'd overheard Frederick speaking with his business associate in the church's vestibule. Words like inheritance, and after we're married, it'll all be mine had drifted through the thin wooden door as she'd prepared to walk down the aisle. When she'd confronted him, his charming smile had twisted into something ugly. The shot he'd fired hadn't been aimed at her, merely a warning into the ceiling when she'd tried to leave, but it had been enough. Hoofbeats approached the square, and Violet held her breath, pressing herself tighter against the fountain. Water splashed softly behind her, a cruel contrast to the chaos of her thoughts. "Where'd she go?" a gruff voice demanded, one of Frederick's friends. "Check the general store, I'll look in the saloon," another replied. Violet didn't dare move. Frederick had connections throughout the territory. The wealthy mine owner had courted her for nearly a year, dazzling her with promises of security and comfort after her father's passing had left her alone in the world. Now she understood he'd only wanted her father's deed to a promising silver claim. Time passed with agonizing slowness. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the town square. Sweat dampened Violet's neck and back, and her cramped legs begged for relief. "Madam, you all right back there?" The deep voice startled her so badly she nearly toppled into the water. A tall shadow fell over her, and Violet looked up into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. He was a stranger, a dusty, trail-worn cowboy with sun-browned skin and broad shoulders. His expression was one of genuine concern rather than the calculating looks Frederick's men wore. "Please," Violet whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't tell them where I am." The cowboy glanced around the square, taking in the situation with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to trouble. Without a word, he unbuckled his long duster coat and handed it to her. "Put this on," he said quietly. "Cover that dress." Violet's hands shook as she pulled the coat around her shoulders. It smelled of leather, horses, and the open prairie. "Name's Owen Blackwell," he said, crouching down beside her. "I've got a horse tied outside the mercantile. Can you walk?" Yes," Violet stammered. Owen nodded. "Stay low. When I say run, you run. I'll be right behind you." "Why are you helping me?" Violet asked, clutching the coat tightly around her. A small smile crossed his face. "Madam, I've never been one to leave a lady in distress, especially not one hiding by a fountain in a wedding dress." Before she could respond, shouts erupted from the direction of the church. "There she is." Frederick's voice carried across the square. "Run," Owen said, helping her to her feet. Violet didn't hesitate. With the cowboy's duster concealing most of her wedding dress, she dashed toward the mercantile, her legs protesting after being cramped for so long. She could hear Owen's steady footsteps behind her, and somehow that gave her courage. A powerful black gelding stood hitched outside the store, saddlebags packed for a long journey. Owen helped her mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. Hold on tight, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Violet clutched the saddle horn as Owen spurred the horse forward. Behind them, she could hear Frederick's enraged shouts and the scramble of men trying to reach their own horses. The gelding's powerful stride ate up the distance, and soon they were galloping out of Cottonwood Springs, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Violet's veil, which had caught on a fence post near the church, fluttered in the breeze like a surrender flag, the only part of her old life she was leaving behind. "Where are we going?" Violet called over her shoulder as they rode hard toward the foothills. "I know a place they won't find us," Owen replied. "Just a few more miles." The sun was beginning its western descent when Owen finally slowed the horse to a walk. They'd followed a narrow trail into a wooded canyon far from the main roads. "There's a line shack up ahead," he explained. "Used it last fall during a cattle drive. Should be stocked with basic supplies." The small cabin appeared between the trees, weathered but solid. Owen helped Violet dismount, her legs nearly buckling beneath her after the long ride. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him as he secured his horse. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Owen tipped his hat. "Couldn't leave my beloved behind that fountain, now could I?" The word beloved hung in the air between them, casual yet somehow significant. Violet felt a blush rise to her cheeks as Owen cleared his throat and looked away. "I meant, couldn't leave anyone in that situation," he corrected himself, suddenly intensely interested in adjusting his saddle. Inside, the line shack was simple but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a narrow cot against another. A rough wooden table with 2 chairs stood in the center, and shelves held canned goods and supplies. "You can take the cot," Owen said, shrugging off his saddlebags. "I'll sleep by the fire." As the shock began to wear off, the reality of her situation hit Violet like a physical blow. She sank into one of the chairs, still wrapped in Owen's duster, the white satin of her wedding dress peeking out from beneath. "I've lost everything," she whispered. "My home, my belongings. Frederick will make sure I can't return." Owen busied himself starting a fire. "Want to tell me what happened back there?" Violet hesitated, then found herself pouring out the whole story: her father's death 6 months prior, Frederick's courtship, the silver claim deed that was her only inheritance, and finally the conversation she'd overheard just before their wedding. "He never wanted me," she finished bitterly. "Just the claim." Owen handed her a tin cup of coffee from the supplies. "Men like Frederick Pullman give the rest of us a bad name," he said. "I've heard of him. Owns half the mines around Pikes Peak. Has a reputation for acquiring properties by any means necessary. What about you?" Violet asked, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm cup. "What brings you to these parts?" "Delivering horses," Owen replied. "I break and train them at my ranch down near Pueblo. Was just passing through Cottonwood Springs on my way home when I spotted a bride hiding by the fountain." Despite everything, Violet found herself smiling. "Not how I expected my wedding day to end. No, I expect not." Owen's blue eyes crinkled at the corners. "But perhaps it's better than the alternative." Night fell, and with it came the sounds of the wilderness hooting owls, the distant howl of coyotes, the rustling of pine boughs in the gentle breeze. Owen had managed to put together a simple meal of beans and jerky, which Violet ate gratefully. She'd changed out of her wedding dress, accepting a spare shirt and trousers from Owen's pack. The clothes were comically large on her slender frame, but infinitely more practical than satin and lace. "I'll take you to the nearest stage stop tomorrow," Owen said as they sat by the fire. "Get you passage to Denver or wherever you want to go." Violet stared into the flames. "And then what? I have no money, no family." "You've still got the deed, don't you?" She nodded slowly. "It's sewn into the lining of my dress. Father always said to keep it close." "Smart man," Owen replied. "That deed's worth something. You could sell the claim, start fresh somewhere." "I suppose," Violet said, though the prospect of navigating such matters alone was daunting. They fell into companionable silence, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Violet studied Owen's profile in the firelight, the strong line of his jaw, the slight bend in his nose that suggested it had been broken once, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar. "Why did you really help me?" she asked suddenly. Owen poked at the fire with a stick. "Told you. Couldn't leave a lady in distress. There must be more to it than that." He was quiet for so long that Violet thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. "2 years ago, my sister found herself in a situation not unlike yours. Man courting her was only after our family's ranch. When she tried to break it off, Owen's knuckles whitened around the stick. He hurt her badly. By the time I found them, it was too late." "I'm so sorry," Violet whispered. "Been looking for him ever since," Owen continued, his voice tight. "When I saw you hiding there, looking so frightened, I guess I saw a chance to do what I couldn't do for her." Impulsively, Violet reached across the space between them and placed her hand on his. "Thank you." Owen's hand turned beneath hers, his calloused fingers curling around her smaller ones. The touch sent a warmth through Violet that had nothing to do with the fire. "Get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow will come soon enough." Violet woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Owen moving quietly around the cabin. Dawn light filtered through the single small window, casting the room in a soft golden glow. "Morning," he greeted her, offering a cup of coffee. "Sleep all right, better than I expected," Violet admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. In truth, she'd slept fitfully, dreaming of Frederick's angry face and the sharp crack of his pistol. "Thought we'd head out after breakfast," Owen said, stirring a pot of oatmeal over the fire. "Make for Silver Creek. There's a stage that comes through every Tuesday." Violet nodded, though the thought of parting ways with Owen brought an unexpected pang. In less than a day, he'd become her protector, her confidant, her friend. As they ate, Owen studied a worn map spread on the table between them. "We'll need to be careful," he said. "Pullman's likely to have men searching the main roads." "Will they come this far?" Violet asked, worry creasing her brow. "Hard to say. Man like that, with his pride wounded and a valuable claim at stake, he won't give up easily." The warning proved prescient. They were just finishing breakfast when Owen suddenly stiffened, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. "Riders," he said quietly. "At least 3 coming up the trail." Violet's heart lurched. "Frederick? Can't tell yet. Quick, gather your things." They moved with urgent efficiency, packing their few belongings. Owen doused the fire while Violet folded the wedding dress into a compact bundle, making sure the deed remained secure in its hidden pocket. "There's a back way out," Owen said, leading her to a narrow door at the rear of the cabin. "Follows a game trail up into the hills. If we can reach the ridge, we can double back to Silver Creek without using the main trail." The sound of approaching hoofbeats grew louder. Owen's horse, already saddled, waited patiently behind the cabin. "Stay low and follow me," Owen instructed, helping her mount before swinging up behind her. They'd barely made it 20 yards into the thick pines when voices carried clearly from the cabin clearing. "Tracks here are fresh," a gruff voice called out. "2 people, 1 horse. Check the cabin." Frederick's unmistakable voice ordered. Owen urged the gelding deeper into the trees, following a barely visible path that wound upward through the dense forest. The horse moved with surprising agility for its size, picking its way carefully over rocks and fallen logs. Shouts erupted behind them, followed by the thunder of hooves. "They've spotted us," Owen said grimly. "Hold tight." He spurred the horse into a gallop, weaving through the trees with reckless speed. Violet clung to the saddle, branches whipping past her face as they raced upward. A shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark from a tree mere inches from Owen's head. "Keep your head down," he shouted, drawing his own pistol and firing back without slowing. The next few minutes were a blur of terror and exhilaration as they climbed higher into the foothills, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant as their pursuers struggled with the difficult terrain. By mid-morning, they'd reached a high ridgeline that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. Owen finally slowed the exhausted horse to a walk. I think we lost them, he said, holstering his pistol. But they'll keep searching. We need to keep moving. Violet nodded, her throat dry with fear and dust. How far to Silver Creek? If we keep to the high country, we can be there by nightfall. They traveled in tense silence for hours, stopping only briefly to rest the horse and drink from a clear mountain stream. As they rode, Violet became increasingly aware of Owen's solid presence behind her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the strength in the arm that occasionally steadied her when the trail grew treacherous. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered over the mountains, and the first fat drops of rain began to fall. There's an old trapper's cabin not far from here, Owen said, scanning the darkening sky. We'd best hole up until this passes. The cabin was little more than a crude shelter, a single room with a dirt floor and a leaky roof, but it offered protection from the storm that now lashed the mountainside with fierce intensity. Owen managed to start a small fire in the stone hearth while Violet wrung water from her hair and clothing. Outside, lightning flashed, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. No traveling further today, Owen observed, settling their meager supplies on a rough shelf. Storm like this could last all night, Violet shivered, drawing closer to the fire. Do you think they're still following us? Not in this weather, Owen replied. Even Pullman's not that foolish. They shared the last of their jerky and a can of peaches found on a shelf, the sweet syrup a welcome change from their otherwise bland provisions. As night fell, the storm grew in intensity, wind howling through gaps in the cabin walls. You're shivering, Owen observed, concern evident in his voice. Violet tried to smile through chattering teeth. I'll be fine. Without a word, Owen removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders, then sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Better? He asked softly. Violet nodded, acutely aware of his proximity. Thank you for everything. Owen stared into the flames. Been thinking about what you said, about not having anywhere to go. Yes, my ranch isn't much, he continued, his voice careful. 200 acres south of Pueblo. Good water, decent grazing. Been building it up for 5 years now. Violet waited, sensing he had more to say. It gets lonely, he admitted finally. After my sister died, it's just been me and the horses. He turned to look at her, firelight dancing in his blue eyes. You could come with me, if you wanted. The offer hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. As what? Violet asked, her heart suddenly racing. Your housekeeper, a slow smile spread across Owen's face. Is that what you want to be? No, she answered honestly. But I don't want charity either. Charity's not what I'm offering, Owen said, his voice dropping lower. In just one day you've shown more courage and determination than most men I've known. I admire that, and I admire you. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with calloused fingers. I know it's sudden, we barely know each other, but sometimes life gives you chances you don't expect. Violet leaned into his touch, surprised by how right it felt. What would people say? A woman running from one man straight to another? I don't much care what people say, Owen replied. Never have, but I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance. Come to Pueblo, see the ranch. If you decide it's not for you, I'll help you get wherever you want to go next. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his face in stark relief, the honesty in his eyes, the gentle set of his mouth. Why do you call me that? Violet asked suddenly. Beloved. Owen looked startled, then slightly embarrassed. Did I say that again? At the fountain and then again at the line shack. He rubbed the back of his neck. It just came out, something my father used to call my mother, his beloved, always liked the sound of it. Violet felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire or Owen's coat. She reached up, covering his hand with hers where it still rested on her cheek. I'd like to see your ranch, she whispered. The smile that lit Owen's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle, it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Outside, The storm raged on, but within the tiny cabin, Violet felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months, perhaps years. Whatever tomorrow might bring, in this moment she was safe. She was wanted, perhaps even beloved. Morning brought clear skies and the sharp, clean scent of pine after rain. They set out at dawn, following a trail that wound down from the high country toward the valley where Silver Creek nestled against the foothills. "Once we reach town, we can send a telegram to the sheriff in Pueblo," Owen explained as they rode. "Let him know to keep an eye out for Pullman or his men." Violet nodded, watching the countryside unfold below them. "Do you think Frederick will give up eventually?" "Men like that don't give up easily," Owen replied honestly, "but they do move on to easier targets when the cost gets too high." By mid-afternoon, the small settlement of Silver Creek came into view, a cluster of wooden buildings straddling a rushing stream that gave the town its name. "Stay close," Owen murmured as they rode down the main street. "Stage office is at the far end." The town was busy with the usual afternoon activities: shopkeepers sweeping boardwalks, wagons delivering goods, a group of miners drinking outside the saloon. Several people glanced curiously at them as they passed, but no one seemed particularly interested in the dusty cowboy and his companion. At the stage office, Owen tied the horse and helped Violet dismount. "Wait here," he said. "I'll check on the next stage and send that telegram." Violet nodded, trying to look casual as she leaned against the hitching post. She changed back into her own clothes, the wedding dress now stuffed into Owen's saddlebag, though she still wore his too large coat over her torn and dirt-stained day dress. As she waited, a poster tacked to the wall of the stage office caught her eye. Moving closer, her blood turned to ice. "Reward: $500 for information leading to Violet Jackson kidnapped from Cottonwood Springs by dangerous outlaw." Below the text was a crude sketch of her face, recognizable despite the artist's limited skill. "Owen," she called urgently as he emerged from the office. He followed her gaze to the poster, his expression hardening. "Pullman's work. He's trying to turn the law against us." "What do we do?" "Stage doesn't leave until tomorrow morning," Owen said, keeping his voice low. "We need to find somewhere to lay low until then." A shout from down the street caught their attention. A man was pointing in their direction, calling to others nearby. "That's her. That's the woman from the poster." "Time to go," Owen said grimly, helping Violet back onto his horse and swinging up behind her in one fluid motion. They galloped out of town, pursued by shouts and the pounding of hooves as several men gave chase. Owen pushed his tired horse hard, heading not for the open country but for a dense stand of trees along the creek. "Hold on," he shouted as they plunged into the rushing water. The gelding fought against the current, water spraying around them as they crossed to the far bank and disappeared into the forest beyond. Their pursuers hesitated at the water's edge, giving Owen and Violet precious minutes to put distance between them. "We can't outrun them for long," Owen said, patting his horse's heaving sides. "Poor boy's nearly spent. What can we do?" Violet asked, clinging to the saddle as they wound through the trees. Owen's face was set in determined lines. "I know these mountains. There's an old mining camp about 5 miles west, abandoned years ago. We can hide there until dark, then circle back to the stage road and make for Pueblo directly." The mining camp was a collection of dilapidated structures clinging to a steep hillside, fallen in shacks, rusted equipment, and the gaping black mouth of a mine shaft secured with weathered boards. Owen led the exhausted horse into what remained of a stable, then helped Violet down. "We should be safe here for a few hours," he said, unsaddling the gelding and rubbing it down with handfuls of old straw. "No one's worked this claim in years." They settled in one of the more intact cabins, its roof mostly whole despite the sagging walls. Owen fashioned a crude barricade across the door using an old table, then took up position by the single grimy window. "Get some rest if you can," he told Violet. "We've got a long ride ahead tonight," but rest proved impossible. Every sound, the creaking of old timbers, The scurrying of small animals in the walls, the whisper of wind through broken boards made Violet start with fear. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally, needing distraction from their precarious situation. Owen's face softened as he glanced away from the window. "It's not much to look at yet. Small house, good barn, creek running through the south pasture, land slopes up to pine woods in the north. And your horses, best quarter horses in Colorado territory," he said with quiet pride. "Been breeding them for stamina and sense. Got about 30 head now, including a new stallion I brought in from Texas last fall." As he spoke, Violet could almost see it, the rolling pastures, the sturdy house, Owen working with his horses in the golden light of evening. "It sounds wonderful," she said softly. "It's a good life," Owen agreed. "Hard work, but satisfying." He hesitated, then added, "Be better shared, though." Before Violet could respond, a distant shout broke the stillness. Owen was instantly alert, moving back to the window. "Riders," he said grimly. "At least 4 coming up the old mine road." Violet's heart raced. "How did they find us? Probably followed our tracks from the creek." Owen checked his pistol, then gestured for Violet to follow him. "We need to move. Now." They slipped out the back of the cabin and made their way through the ruins of the mining camp, keeping low and using the broken structures for cover. Owen led the way to the mine entrance, pulling away several of the boards that blocked the opening. "We can hide in here," he whispered. "Just inside the entrance. It's not safe to go deeper." The old mine smelled of damp earth and rotting timber. Owen guided Violet just inside the entrance, where light still filtered through the broken boards, then replaced them as best he could from the inside. "What about your horse?" Violet asked. "Had to leave him," Owen said regretfully. "If we survive this, I'll come back for him." They pressed themselves against the rough wall of the mine shaft, listening to the sounds of men searching the camp. Voices carried clearly in the still mountain air. "Check every building." "They can't have gone far." $500, boys. That's what Pullman's offering." Owen's arm tightened around Violet's shoulders. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I want you to know I don't regret finding you by that fountain." Violet turned her face into his chest, breathing in his scent of leather and pine. "Nor I being found." The minutes stretched endlessly as they listened to the search party moving through the abandoned buildings. Footsteps approached the mine entrance, and both held their breath as a shadow fell across the boarded opening. "Anything in there?" a voice called. "Nah, sealed up tight," came the reply after a brief inspection. "They must have headed up the ridge." The footsteps moved away, and Owen released a silent breath. They remained motionless for what seemed like hours until the sounds of the search party faded into the distance. "They're heading west," Owen observed, peering through a crack between the boards. "Away from the stage road." "So we go east?" Violet asked. Owen nodded. "As soon as it's dark, we'll have to travel on foot until we can find or buy another horse." Night fell with the swiftness peculiar to the mountains, darkness enveloping the abandoned camp in deep shadow. Owen carefully removed the boards from the mine entrance, listening intently for any sound that might indicate their pursuers had returned. "All clear," he whispered. "Stay close." They moved silently through the ruins, Owen leading the way with the confidence of a man accustomed to finding paths in darkness. The moon, just past full, provided enough light to navigate by once they reached open ground. "It's about 15 miles to the stage road," Owen said as they picked their way down the hillside. "If we walk through the night, we can be there by morning." Violet nodded, determination overriding her exhaustion. "I can make it." They traveled in companionable silence for hours, stopping only briefly to rest and drink from clear mountain streams. As they walked, Violet found herself studying Owen's profile in the moonlight, wondering at the twist of fate that had brought them together. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze. "That if not for Frederick's greed, we never would have met," she replied honestly. Owen's laugh was soft in the darkness. "Guess I owe the man a debt then." "Do you really think we can escape him?" "I do," Owen said with quiet conviction. Men like Pullman may have money and connections, but they're usually cowards at heart. Once he realizes getting to you means going through me, he'll likely move on to easier prey. And if he doesn't? Owen stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the silvery moonlight, his eyes were serious. Then we face him together. I'm not letting you go, Violet Jackson, not unless that's what you want. The declaration, simple but profound, took her breath away. I don't want that, she whispered. Owen's smile was slow and sure as he bent to kiss her, his lips warm despite the cool night air. Violet's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer, pouring into the kiss all the emotions she couldn't yet put into words. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Owen rested his forehead against hers. We should keep moving, he said reluctantly. Violet nodded, though she would have been content to stay in his arms until dawn. They reached the stage road as the first light of day was breaking over the eastern plains. The road was empty, stretching like a pale ribbon through the landscape. Pueblo's about 60 miles south, Owen said, scanning the horizon. We need to find transportation. Fortune favored them an hour later when they encountered a freight wagon headed south. The driver, a grizzled old man named Jeb, was happy to offer them a ride in exchange for Owen's fine pocket watch. Mighty fine timepiece, the old man observed, turning the silver watch over in his gnarled hands. Worth more than a ride to Pueblo. Keep it, Owen said. Consider the extra payment for your discretion if anyone comes asking after us. Jeb's rheumy eyes twinkled. Son, in my 70 years, I've learned when not to see things and when not to hear questions. You two just climb in back and make yourselves comfortable. The journey to Pueblo took 2 days, the heavily laden wagon moving at a leisurely pace that tested Violet's patience, but allowed them to avoid the main stopping points where Frederick's men might be watching. When they finally crested a rise and saw the sprawling town of Pueblo spread before them, Violet felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Almost home, Owen said, his hand finding hers among the freight crates where they sat, home. The word stirred something deep within Violet, a longing, a hope, a promise of something she'd thought forever lost. They parted ways with Jeb at the edge of town, Owen directing them toward the sheriff's office. Sheriff Thomas Riggs was an old friend, he explained, and someone they could trust. The sheriff, a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper mustache, listened gravely to their story, examining the reward poster Owen had taken from Silver Creek. Frederick Pullman, he mused, stroking his mustache. Name's familiar. Wasn't he mixed up in that business over in Fairplay last year? Something about claim jumping? Wouldn't surprise me, Owen replied. Man's got a reputation. Sheriff Riggs nodded thoughtfully. I'll send telegrams to the territorial judge and the sheriff in Cottonwood Springs. If this Pullman filed false charges against you two, he'll have some explaining to do. Relief washed over Violet. Thank you, Sheriff. In the meantime, Riggs continued, I suggest you two lay low. Blackwell, that ranch of yours is remote enough. Should be safe there until we sort this out. Owen's ranch lay 10 miles outside of Pueblo, nestled in a verdant valley between rolling hills. As they approached on horses borrowed from the sheriff, Violet found herself holding her breath at the sight. It was exactly as Owen had described, a modest but well-built house of hewn logs, a large barn with a corral where several beautiful horses grazed, pastures stretching to a line of pines in the distance. It's beautiful, she breathed. Owen's expression was a mixture of pride and uncertainty. It's not much compared to what Pullman could offer. It's everything, Violet replied, meaning it with all her heart. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sheriff Riggs kept his word, sending telegrams that eventually cleared Violet's name. Frederick Pullman, facing charges of his own for filing false reports and discharging a firearm in a church, apparently decided that pursuing Violet further wasn't worth the trouble. The deed to her father's silver claim, still safely sewn into the lining of her wedding dress, proved valuable indeed. With Owen's help, Violet sold it to a reputable mining company for a sum that assured her financial independence. And through it all, their feelings for each other deepened and grew. Owen taught Violet to ride properly, to help with the horses, to find her way around the ranch that was becoming more like home with each passing day. On a warm evening in late July, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Owen took Violet to his favorite spot on the ranch, a small rise overlooking the creek where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said, suddenly nervous in a way she'd never seen before. Violet's heart quickened as Owen took her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long," he began, his blue eyes earnest in the fading light. "But I think I've loved you since I found you hiding by that fountain." "Owen," Violet whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. "I'm not offering a grand mansion or fine clothes," he continued, dropping to one knee before her. "Just this ranch, these hands, and a heart that will cherish you always." From his pocket, he produced a simple gold band. "Violet Jackson, will you be my wife, my partner, my beloved?" Joy welled up within her, bright and boundless as the Colorado sky. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, with all my heart." Owen slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. As twilight deepened around them, Violet thought of the path that had brought her here, from a bride hiding in fear to a woman standing tall beside the man she loved. Not all who wander are lost, she thought. Sometimes they're just finding their way home. 6 months later, on a crisp winter morning, Violet and Owen exchanged vows in the small church in Pueblo, surrounded by new friends and the horses Owen insisted were part of the family. And if anyone found it strange that the bride carried a small stone fountain figure as a good luck charm, they were too polite to mention it. After all, every love story has its beginning. Theirs just happened to start with a bride hiding beside a fountain, and a cowboy who found her and called her beloved.